I hid because I thought that my Tourette's made me ugly.
A young star once celebrated for his infectious energy and bold honesty suddenly disappeared from the spotlight. Fans were left shocked, searching for answers, while whispers of controversy and personal struggle quietly circulated behind the scenes. What really happened to the person millions believed they knew? What started as an unstoppable rise would soon spiral into questions that no one could fully answer. This is the story of Baylen Dupree, a tale of ambition, fame, and the fragility of public trust. Baylen Dupree's early life was marked by a quiet intensity that often went unnoticed by the casual observer. Born into a modest household, he grew up surrounded by the ordinary struggles of everyday life, yet he carried an extraordinary spark of ambition. Reports suggest that as a child, Baylen was endlessly curious, asking questions that many adults struggled to answer, and dreaming of a life that extended far beyond the confines of his neighborhood. Friends and family recall a young boy who was charismatic even in small circles, someone who could command attention without demanding it, naturally drawing people toward him with a combination of humor and insight. But beneath the charm was a deep, almost relentless drive, a desire to carve out a place in a world that often overlooked quiet talent. School days for Baylen were a mixture of the mundane and the formative. Teachers later described him as a student who was both attentive and questioning, someone who absorbed knowledge eagerly, but also challenged the status quo in subtle ways. Classmates remember a young man who could effortlessly oscillate between being approachable and profoundly focused, someone who seemed to see opportunities where others only saw obstacles. During this time, he cultivated skills that would later define his career: communication, observation, and the uncanny ability to connect with people from all walks of life. Even in adolescence, Baylen seemed to understand that success would require more than talent. It demanded strategy, timing, and an authentic presence that audiences could relate to. The first significant breakthrough came in his late teens, when a small online platform offered him the opportunity to host short segments covering youth culture, lifestyle, and entertainment trends. What began as an experimental project quickly revealed Baylen's natural aptitude for connecting with audiences. Viewers were drawn not just to his words, but to his energy, the way he spoke directly to them, creating a sense of intimacy despite the digital divide. Analysts suggest that his ability to blend entertainment with authenticity made him stand out in an increasingly saturated online environment. Unlike many peers who chase trends, Baylen seemed to intuitively understand how to create content that resonated emotionally while remaining compellingly shareable. As his platform grew, so did the recognition. Viral clips and collaborative features with other influencers expanded his reach, building momentum that many considered meteoric. Social media became both a tool and a stage for his ambitions, with followers and fans quickly taking notice of his unique voice. But even in these early stages, those closest to him observed signs of internal struggle. The relentless pursuit of visibility and validation carried weight, and the pressures of maintaining constant engagement began to surface. Reports suggest that Baylen frequently stayed up late crafting content, analyzing audience reactions, and refining his approach, a testament to both dedication and the underlying anxiety that often accompanies rising fame. Despite these challenges, Baylen's ascent remained largely unstoppable. He was a figure defined by contrasts: ambitious yet approachable, calculated yet spontaneous, confident yet quietly vulnerable. These qualities, combined with a sharp understanding of digital media, set him apart from other emerging creators. Friends recall conversations in which he spoke of larger goals, hinting at aspirations that extended far beyond short-term recognition. Yet, even as he navigated early success, subtle tensions foreshadowed the obstacles ahead. The same drive that fueled his rise hinted at the potential for conflict, both personal and professional, a tension between the public persona he was building and the private pressures that he carried alone. By the time this first stage of his journey concluded, Baylen Dupree had transformed from an ambitious teenager into a rising digital personality, one whose energy and determination captivated audiences. The foundation for fame had been laid, But the story was far from complete. Behind the viral videos and growing follower counts, there lingered questions that would soon define the trajectory of his career. Could he maintain this momentum? Would the pressures of attention and expectation become too heavy? And, as the world looked on, would the spark that drove him forward also be the spark that threatened to consume him? The early promise of Baylen Dupree was undeniable, but the pressures that accompanied rapid success were quietly forming, setting the stage for a turning point that would challenge everything he had worked to achieve. As Baylen Dupree's audience expanded, so did the scale of his influence. Reports indicate that his platform reached millions, with viewers eagerly anticipating every segment and video upload. Social media became both a mirror and a magnifier, reflecting his growing prominence while amplifying every word and action. The fame brought power. Brand deals, sponsorships, collaborations with high-profile influencers, and invitations to events that once seemed unreachable. His name became synonymous with energy, authenticity, and relatability, drawing admiration from fans and attention from industry insiders alike. But with this rise came an invisible weight, a pressure to not just perform, but to constantly evolve and maintain the level of engagement that had catapulted him into the spotlight. The lifestyle that came with success was glamorous but demanding. Reports suggest that Baylen enjoyed financial freedom and creative autonomy, allowing him to experiment with formats, storytelling, and personal expression in ways many creators could only dream of. Yet the visibility that fueled his growth also made him vulnerable. Every joke, comment, or opinion was scrutinized, dissected, and shared across social media platforms. What had once been a strength, his candidness and openness, became a double-edged sword. Fans adored his honesty, but critics and online commentators began questioning his motives, suggesting that popularity might be overshadowing substance. Friends and colleagues reportedly noticed a tension in Baylen, as he struggled to balance the authenticity his audience loved with the commercial expectations imposed by sponsors and platforms. A turning point arrived during one of his high-profile collaborations, which initially promised to elevate his career further. Allegedly, disagreements behind the scenes over creative direction escalated into visible tension. The collaboration, once hailed as an innovative project, became the focus of online debate and criticism. Analysts suggest that this period marked the beginning of a subtle yet noticeable shift in public perception. Where Baylen had previously been celebrated for ingenuity, his actions were now scrutinized for possible missteps or ego-driven decisions. This scrutiny created a delicate balancing act. The very traits that made him relatable, spontaneity, boldness, and candor, also made him susceptible to misinterpretation and backlash. During this time, Baylen's personal life reportedly became intertwined with professional pressures. Sources close to him hint at mounting stress, fatigue, and moments of isolation, as he sought to manage both his creative ambitions and the growing expectations of a vast and increasingly vocal audience. Observers note that the very intensity and work ethic that had fueled his meteoric rise now threatened to destabilize him. Friends described long hours of content creation, repeated self-critiques, and a constant effort to anticipate audience reactions, all while attempting to maintain his signature authenticity. The pressure created an invisible tension, a quiet but persistent strain that few could detect, but that began shaping his public persona in unexpected ways. Despite the challenges, Baylen continued to achieve remarkable successes. Each new segment, video, and collaboration expanded his reach and solidified his influence. Yet beneath the surface, questions began to emerge. Questions about sustainability, loyalty, and the costs of maintaining relevance in a world obsessed with immediacy. Analysts point to a growing dissonance between Baylen's public image and private reality. While fans saw a vibrant, confident creator, behind closed doors, he grappled with uncertainty, stress, and the realization that the standards he had set for himself were perhaps unmatchable. By the end of this chapter, Baylen's story had evolved from triumph to tension. The energy that once seemed limitless now coexisted with doubt, speculation, and the creeping awareness that fame, while intoxicating, was fragile. Every choice, every collaboration, and every online interaction carried weight beyond the immediate moment. Questions lingered. Could he sustain this level of influence without compromising his integrity? How would the pressures of public scrutiny shape his decisions? And most importantly, would the very audience that had lifted him to prominence ultimately witness his undoing? Just when it seemed that Baylen Dupree had reached the pinnacle of his influence, forces both seen and unseen began to challenge everything he had built, foreshadowing a descent that no fan could have anticipated. The first signs of trouble for Baylen Dupree emerged quietly, almost imperceptibly at first. Small controversies, subtle criticisms, and shifting audience sentiment hinted at a larger story brewing behind the polished surface of his digital persona. Social media, which had once celebrated his authenticity, became a lens for scrutiny. Comments that praised him weeks earlier were now dissecting his every move, interpreting offhand remarks as evidence of misjudgment or pretense. What had been a community of admiration slowly transformed into a chorus of skepticism and doubt. Analysts suggest that the pressures of constant visibility, combined with the ever-present need to maintain relevance, created a tension that became increasingly difficult for Baylen to navigate. As his public image began to fracture, the consequences became more tangible. Collaborations fell through, sponsorships were delayed or quietly withdrawn, and even longtime supporters began questioning his decisions. Reports indicate that Baylen's content frequency decreased as the weight of public expectation collided with personal strain. Friends and insiders recall a sense of withdrawal, moments when Baylen would retreat from the spotlight, avoiding interactions that had once energized him. He appeared to struggle with reconciling the image of himself that fans adored with the reality of his daily life, a dissonance that only grew as the public gaze intensified. Media coverage amplified the narrative of tension and uncertainty. Articles speculated on the reasons behind his absence from the usual streams of content. Social media threads debated his authenticity, and online forums dissected past actions for hidden meaning. Interviews with associates suggest that Baylen faced not only the external pressures of fame, but also an internal reckoning, questioning whether the path he had chosen aligned with his own values and aspirations. Every choice carried weight, and every silence became a statement, whether intended or not. The collapse was not sudden or explosive, but gradual, subtle, and profoundly human, a reminder that the cost of influence can be as invisible as it is high. Yet even in the midst of uncertainty, Baylen's story retained its emotional power. Fans continued to discuss and dissect his journey, expressing both confusion and concern. The connection he had forged during his rise was strong enough that his withdrawal left a palpable void, leaving many questioning what had changed and why. Some speculated burnout, others hinted at personal conflicts, and a few believed the pressures of fame had simply grown too intense. Regardless of the reason, the result was the same: the disappearance of a figure who had once seemed omnipresent, whose energy and voice had defined a generation of followers, now replaced by silence and unanswered questions. The lessons embedded in Baylen's story are complex. They do not come with simple morality or predictable endings. Instead, they linger as a cautionary tale of ambition, vulnerability, and the fragility of public adoration. Observers note that the most haunting aspect is not the decline itself, but the uncertainty surrounding it. What internal struggles drove his retreat? What external pressures could he have mitigated? And what were simply unavoidable consequences of digital fame? The questions remain unanswered, leaving fans, media, and even collaborators speculating about the unseen forces that shaped his journey. In the end, Baylen Dupree's story is defined as much by what remains hidden as by what was visible to the public eye. His rise and retreat illustrate the delicate balance between influence and vulnerability, ambition and sustainability. Even as he steps back, the echoes of his work, personality, and connection with fans continue to resonate, raising questions that may never find resolution. The silence he leaves behind is not empty. It tells a story of a creator who gave his all to an audience, and in doing so, exposed the fragility of human endurance beneath the bright lights of fame. The answers to Baylen Dupree's retreat may never come, But the story he left behind continues to captivate, leaving fans, followers, and observers questioning the true cost of life in the spotlight.